We've been so busy in our lives seeking things. You know what George Bernard Shaw said? There are two great disappointments in life: not getting what you want and getting it, right? And so we've been so busy trying to get things. It's endless in some way. And in doing so, we lose touch with the world that's right here in front of us, that's so alive. We lose the sense of color and texture and taste because we're busy looking for something else.
Hey there, and welcome back to Jack Kornfield's Heart Wisdom podcast, nestled so sweetly on the Be Here Now network amidst amazing podcasts from Jack's friends and fellow teachers. I'm Ganesh, and I am honored to open the door to episode 253, Healing Through Meditation, an in-body experience. And this is the first episode in a two-part series, which was first recorded in late December of 1991. This one is about having an in-body experience, rather than trying to meditate it away and get to this beautiful, out-of-body, blissful experience that we can share. No shade on out-of-body experiences. They offer a great bit of perspective. But this is about being present for what is arising in this moment and really listening in to what our body is trying to share with us and what it's trying to release and wants us to be present for. So I really hope you enjoy this episode. We'll get right into it. But first, just a couple bits of housekeeping so you can keep in touch with what Jack has going on. I guess the premier bit of intel to lead with is Jack has a new online course, what I think is his best online offering yet. It is The Awakened Heart, Discovering Your Great Joy and Peace. And it's all about the divine abodes, the Brahma Viharas in Buddhism, the four qualities of the awakened heart: loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity or peace. In this really masterful and wonderfully shot course, which puts you in a very virtual but very live setting with Jack at Spirit Rock, opens you up to what these qualities are, how they were described by the Buddha, and how we can then apply them to this modern life in gratitude, in generosity, in how we can serve this world and serve the highest intentions and aspects of ourselves and others in joy, which is a truly beautiful, loving, and radical act in this world. So if you head over to jackkornfield.com, you can start signing up for The Awakened Heart. I believe by the time this is out, enrollment should be open. Then on Monday, September 2nd, Jack is back for the Spirit Rock Monday Night Dharma Talk and Guided Meditation. These are online. They are pay what you can, and a great way to tap in with Jack and the current zeitgeist of whatever is bubbling up in his heart. And then on September 28th, we have Jack and Trudy Goodman at Spirit Rock for Love and Relationship, the Great Spiritual Practice. This is going to be a wonderful day-long retreat, and if you can't make it in person, that may have already filled up, you can tune in digitally for the digital day-long spiritual retreat. You can find all of this at jackkornfield.com under events. All right. So as always, I thank you for being here. This is episode 253, Healing Through Meditation, an in-body experience. May you be happy, may you be healthy, may you help others through your authenticity, and may your heart be smiling. Namaste.
This retreat, I'd like to start to speak about a perspective of practice that is really central to the whole process, and that is healing. I was told today by a friend visiting that the Roshi in New York City, Tetsugen Sensei, who runs a center in the Bronx, a Zen center. We'll be offering a retreat in April for a small number of selected students on homelessness. And his Zen center's ministry, in a way, is to serve the poor and to bring practice in a way of service to those who need it. This particular retreat, for only a dozen selected people, will take place in the Bowery in New York. And you will meet there with other people wearing whatever suitable clothes you bring. And you're allowed to bring $5, and that's all. And they will sit 3 times a day at designated times at a particular park. And for those 5 days, you will live on the streets as a homeless person, or go to homeless shelters as a homeless person might, and do your meditation in the middle of it all. Looking for a way to find strength and wakefulness and compassion in the midst of the world itself. I often begin this talk about healing by reminding people that both the Buddha and Jesus were considered great healers, great physicians, healers of the heart and the spirit, as well as the body. During one visit that I made in Vietnam to a monastery in the Mekong Delta during the wartime, I went to visit a famous old Vietnamese monk, the coconut monk, he was called. And the day that I arrived at his monastery, we went by bus and then by boat, there was a lot of helicopters and firefights. It was an active war zone. And after arriving at the monastery, they took us to the hill, which was on the backside of this island in the delta. And there was a great 50 or 60 foot tall statue of Buddha standing there, smiling, with all the helicopters in the distance around him. And right next to him was a 50 or 60 foot tall statue of Jesus. And they had their arms around each other's shoulders. It was a very powerful image. I still hold it. To see them holding one another as brothers and smiling, the smile of tremendous compassion in the midst of the war, in the midst of that sorrow. As we begin to practice together, we can sense that meditation and spiritual work is to bring a heartfelt awareness to our life. And out of this there comes a deep healing, an awakening or opening, which we could call healing. This healing arises when we listen deeply, when we connect our life, our breath, our body, our movements with our hearts. In the trip that I spoke of last night that our family took to Bali and Thailand earlier this year, when we were staying in Bali, my daughter Caroline decided to study Balinese dance because we were going out and seeing all of these different Balinese plays and dances, Ramayana and so forth. And a lot of children dance in Bali. So we found a teacher for her, and there were all these other 5- and 6-year-olds who were dancing. She took a series of lessons. And then as we were getting ready to leave Bali, her teacher asked if she would like to do a recital, what she'd learned. So we went over to his house where he had a stage and these other people around, and it was time for her recital, and I had my camera. I was going to document this, right? And they started to dress my daughter up, 6-year-old, and they put on a silk skirt and this kind of gold waistband, and then they wrapped her in about 15 layers of silk sari, and then they put makeup. They changed her hair from kind of light color to dark and put different eyebrows and makeup, enough makeup for a 6-year-old girl to die for. It was so much makeup. She loved it, and golden flowers out of her hair. And they're going on with this, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. They're still fixing her up. And I'm getting kind of impatient. Here's Dad, ready to take pictures, and all right, let's get the show on the road. And they keep making her up and fixing her and putting more gold bracelets on. And finally, I looked at what was going on, and I realized that they were giving her the same kind of attention as a 6-year-old that they would give to any other artist in their culture. They don't consider children exactly in Bali. They consider them small people. And they consider any artist as someone who is performing for the gods. So if you're 6 years old, or if you're the princess of Ubud and you're the greatest dancer and singer in Bali, you get the same attention before a performance, the same silk and the same makeup and the same gold. And here was the 6-year-old girl who was going to go out and perform for the gods. And they took almost an hour to make her up, which is a long time for a 6-year-old, in case you don't remember. And she loved it. And she went out and did the most beautiful dancing she'd ever done, and everyone watched her, and it was just wonderful. And in it, I got a sense of the kind of care and respect that can be given to a child, or to ourselves, or to anything that we care about. And what beauty comes out of that kind of respect. I mean, think about it. Think of what kind of people would grow up in a culture where you are held as a child with that kind of respect. We've lost that in our times here, as you probably have noticed. Thomas Merton asked a Zen novice that he ran into, who'd completed a couple of years of novitiate training in a Zen monastery, what he'd learned. Did he have satori, enlightenment, some special realization or something? What did he learn in his first couple of years? And the novice said, I learned how to open and close doors. To really open the door and how to really close a door. And Katagiri Roshi, a wonderful Zen teacher who died recently in this country, a friend of mine visited him shortly before he died and took with them a person who asked him if he could tell her the essence of Zen practice, the kind of question you ask a Zen master when they're dying. And he picked up the cup that was next to his bed, and he kind of tossed it down on the table, and he said, you can do things like this, or he picked it up off the table again and held it in his 2 hands and placed it down really beautifully and with care. He said, or you can do them like that. And that was his teaching. This kind of listening, this kind of respect is the ground for the healing that we all search for in our life. From Don Juan, he says, look at every path closely and deliberately. Try it as many times as you think necessary, and then ask yourself and yourself alone one question. My benefactor told me about it once when I was young and my blood was too vigorous to understand it, but now I understand it. I will tell you what it is. Does this path have a heart? If it does, it is good. If it doesn't, it is of no use. So this is the kind of respect or attention that we begin with to heal in our life. And as we do, as we pay attention and listen with respect to our breath, to our walking, to our eating, we discover that the healing of spiritual life follows the 4 foundations of mindfulness that the Buddha spoke of, the 4 areas of mindfulness, of the body, of feelings in the heart, of the mind, and then of the process of life or nature, the laws, the Dharma. Whether you're a new or an old student at this retreat, we begin to sit, and you can sense yourself reconnecting with the body. There's a settling down process that happens in the first day. I'm sure you mostly could feel it. The breath starts to get a little quieter. Sometimes it gets very soft, and you have to bring a careful and soft, respectful kind of attention to feel, subtle attention, to feel that little bit of movement of the life breath in the body. How to bring that attention to a place where you're sensing it without trying to manipulate or control it too much, just letting it be soft and listening more carefully. And then you see, as you feel the breath and the mind goes away, that what you're asked to do really is to come back over and over. It's not just to sense the breath, but to come back 1,000 times or 100,000 times. You wander away and bring your heart and your mind back again. Here we are, the next moment, the next breath. The image traditionally is of training a puppy. This little puppy runs around, you put it down. Stay. Does it listen? We all know the answer to that. Gets up, runs around, makes a mess. Clean it up a little bit, bring it back, stay again, over and over again. You don't want to beat the puppy. It's not a lot of fun for the puppy, and I don't think you enjoy it very much either. But it's recognizing that we've gone away and discovering that we can come back and reconnect with the body again and again. What we're after, you all have heard of out-of-the-body experiences. What we're after is something more unusual and important in our culture called an in-the-body experience, right? That line from James Joyce where he writes, Mr. Duffy lived a short distance from his body. And so the first ground of spiritual life is simply to come back and be here in this physical body. And as we do, we encounter pains. Some of it because of an uncomfortable posture that we're not used to, or, sometimes a signal that there's something we need to pay attention to. But most often, the pains we feel as we sit, our shoulders hurt, our back hurts, our jaw hurts, is simply that tension that we carry in our bodies below the level of our awareness. And as we sit, all the patterns of holding begin to show themselves, reveal themselves. Those of you who've heard this talk before may do well just to be reminded of this point anyway. It's not that you're doing anything wrong, or that you hiked up a mountain with a big backpack that it should hurt. It's just that weeks and months or years of contracting when we're afraid and reacting in different ways, we stash it in patterns in our body. And gradually, these patterns begin to show themselves, knots start to open. And all that was held there, the feelings, the physical sensations, sometimes memories, they start to release. And in it, it's sometimes painful. There's a very deep physical opening that happens as we sit, sometimes just in the release over the days and week or more of our sitting together, sometimes very powerfully, rushes of energy, spontaneous movement, kundalini kinds of things, which is simply another word for the opening of our energy body, a deep transformation that's physical in meditation. And what we're asked to do is to honor this body we've been given, to re-inhabit it, to heal it, to touch it with our attention wisely. And as you do, and the pain comes, when we continue in the next couple of days opening the field of attention, you want to allow that to be part of the meditation, to name it softly, hot, cold, tension, tingling, pain, whatever the sensation is, naming it softly, tension, tension, giving it a lot of space, letting it get stronger or weaker or open or turn into fire. Let it do what it needs to open. Sometimes it'll go away. Sometimes it will stay the same. Sometimes it will get worse. That's not your business. Your job is to sit and keep your heart open and your attention soft and let the body open as it will. Sometimes there'll be pleasure. There are people who are more afraid of pleasure than pain. It's true, you also want to be able to learn to sit and feel that which is pleasurable. The healing of the body is the opening of the heart in the midst of it all. Stephen Levine, good friend and also Vipassana teacher, we've taught together a lot, works a great deal with people with life-threatening illnesses and death and dying. And most all of the healing work that he teaches is simply bringing mercy, tenderness, compassion to the places in the body that we've run away from, the disease, the wounds, the things that we've pushed out of our heart. There's a powerful article written by a Zen student some years ago who was born without her left arm. And she says, as a child, it was so terrible because either people would start coming up to her and saying, "What's the matter with you?" kind of in a nervous way, or even worse, were the children asking her what happened to her arm and their parents going, "Shh, don't talk about it." And that was the main thing. People didn't even want to look. So she didn't look, she said, and finally she went to this Zen center, and you're supposed to sit with this kind of mudra, this hand gesture like this, only she had just one hand, and she didn't know quite how to do it because it felt so awkward, and no one there even talked to her about it. She sat for a couple of years, and her body felt really out of kilter. Finally, she got a little cushion to rest this one hand on. She said, "I remember the first time I really looked at my arm. I was 25 years old. For 25 years, she hadn't let herself look at that." That's true for all of us in some way. Do you know what I mean? Those places in ourselves that we've closed our eyes to, that we haven't want to touch or feel. And as we begin to sit, the body is there for us to re-inhabit, to reopen, to touch the places that are most wounded or closed or fearful to us. One of the most beautiful images of the Buddha's enlightenment comes actually before his enlightenment. He was practicing, as most of you know, after he left the palace, and he did 6 years of great ascetic practice. He said no one on earth had done more severe ascetic practice. He did as much as anyone could do it and not die. You know, beds of nails and lying out in the hot sun and fasting till he was emaciated and holding his breath until he almost died. Trying to beat his body into submission and get rid of his desires and get rid of his grasping and get rid of his anger by force. And after doing it to the greatest extent that he could, one day he sat down and he had a vision come. He remembered sitting in his father's garden as a young man under a rose apple tree. And the memory came of sitting under that tree and sensing a well-being and a connectedness and a wholeness that he had never experienced in all his years of ascetic yogic practice. And somehow he remembered out of that what he was seeking was not to fight against himself, but rather was here in honoring himself. And out of that vision, he stopped all his ascetic practice and took nourishment again, began to care for his body, and in a sense to love himself as that child in his father's garden. And from that place of wholeness and of respect and caring, then came his great enlightenment. As we sit and the body opens and there's a healing of the senses too, not just of the tightness and the places within us that we allow to open. We've been so busy in our lives seeking things. You know what George Bernard Shaw said, there are two great disappointments in life, not getting what you want and getting it, right? And so we've been so busy trying to get things. It's endless in some way. And in doing so, we lose touch with the world that's right here in front of us, that's so alive. We lose the sense of color and texture and taste because we're busy looking for something else. Someone was saying to Picasso once that he ought to make pictures of things the way they are, objective pictures, not what he was painting. He mumbled he wasn't quite sure what that was. So the person who was kind of complaining took a photograph of his wife out of his pocket and said, "There, you see, that's a picture of how she really is." And Picasso looked at it and said, "She's rather small, isn't she? And kind of flat." And actually, we have done that in a way. When we get so busy in our lives, the world loses its vitality and its aliveness. Thoreau said, many people go fishing for their whole lives without knowing that it's not fish that they're really after. And we're so busy doing these things that we lose the sense of the sky around us and the trees and the stars and what it's like to take a step or have a cup of tea and hear the clink of the spoon in the glass. You get that here because it's so silent. And feel the warmth of the cup in your hands because you're not listening to the radio at the same time, and smell it before you drink it and have that tea come into all of your senses, your ears and eyes and nose and tongue. There's a kind of healing that comes just in reconnecting with the senses and the world around us. But it's hard to do also because when we reconnect with the world, we see immense sorrow. The warfare in Yugoslavia for no good purpose. It's just going to end up, little countries, whether they kill each other or not, it's going to end up pretty much the same way. The kind of poverty that's unnecessary because there's enough wealth that we don't need to have children starving on this earth. When you spend $1 trillion a year on weapons. The kind of loneliness and isolation. And we sense how much we and others have run away or hide. This is from a book on addictions. Addictions to substances, drugs and alcohol or processes, gambling, sex, workaholism, doesn't matter, usually have a meaning beyond our personal problem. The society in which we currently live needs addictions. Its essence fosters them. It fosters addictions because the best adjusted person in a technological society is the person who is not dead and not alive, just numb, a zombie. When you're dead, you're not able to do the work of the society. If you are fully alive, you are constantly saying no to many of the processes of the society, the racism, the polluted environment, the nuclear threat, the arms race, drinking unsafe water, and eating carcinogenic foods. Thus, it is in the interest of a technological society to promote those things that take the edge off, keep us busy with our fixes, and keep us slightly numbed out. Consequently, the society not only encourages addictions, it functions as an addict. But when we keep ourselves busy, running, addicted to speed, movement, wherever we're going, we miss life. If we're willing to let the sorrow in and see that which is here, then all around us we will also see the mystery, something precious. We can sense this other possibility of being alive. The winter sky, the crunch of the snow under your feet, the forests, and your concern for the ozone, an acid rain, because you really see the trees and how important they are just to be able to see them. The food that you have, the granola they serve for breakfast, the apple that you eat at tea time. And just to touch that kind of beauty with your attention gives a kind of strength to face the suffering of the world, to care for it, to respond to it. Viktor Frankl wrote, "We who lived in concentration camps can remember those who walked through the huts, comforting others, giving away their last piece of bread. They may have been few in number, but they offer sufficient proof that everything can be taken from us but one thing, the last of human freedoms, to choose our spirit, our attitude, in the face of any set of circumstances." So there's a kind of healing that comes when we open our eyes and our heart to the world around us, to its sorrows, to its joys, and to the mystery. It's a book I got recently that's called Children's Letter to God, written in different children's handwriting, I guess collected at some variety of Sunday schools. I'll read you a few of their short letters that give you a sense of maybe that peace that can be reawakened here. Dear God, are you really invisible, or is that just a trick? Lucy. Right? Dear God, instead of letting people die and having to make new ones, why don't you just keep the ones you got now? Jane. Dear God, how come you did all those miracles in the old days and don't do any now? Seymour. Dear God, if we come back as something, please don't let me be Jennifer Horton because I hate her. Dear God, I'll bet it is very hard for you to love all of everybody in the whole world. There are only 4 people in our family, and I can never do it. Nan. Couple more for you if I can find them. Dear God, baby Cain and Abel wouldn't kill each other so much if they had their own rooms. It works with my brother and me. Dear God, on Halloween, I'm going to wear a devil's costume. Is that all right with you? Dear God, I didn't think orange went with purple until I saw the sunset you made on Tuesday. It was cool. Eugene. Dear God, I'm doing the best I can. Frank. So, there is this sense when we slow down and reconnect with our breath and our steps and our body and the difficulties in the world and the mystery of it, that something heals in us. Just as the body and the earth, our connection with it, can heal through practice, the attention and meditation can bring a healing to the heart. The Buddha called this a full awareness of feelings, the capacity to feel that which is pleasant and neutral and unpleasant. And like the mother of the world, our meditation brings us to feel the pain of the world that we're all given in our hearts and the joy of it.